Good morning. My name is Johannes Gebregeorgis, as you have just heard, and I'm very delighted to be here to speak to you about the power of stories. What are stories? What do they mean for us, for our lives? We're surrounded with stories every day. Stories are not just what we hear, they're also what we see. A picture tells a story. The streets, the villages, the cities are full of stories. What are the stories that influenced your lives? Especially stories of your childhood. I will tell you what stories have impacted my life and why I have chosen the path that I have chosen today or in the past. I was born in a small village in the southern part of Ethiopia called Negele Borana. Many people probably don't know where Negele Borana is. It's now in the Oromia region, formerly in the Sidamo province during the imperial regime. Negele is a small town, almost a village you can call it, but there were stories all over. From the Great Borana, the herdsmen, the cattle, men and women of the Oromo tribe, abounded stories in our childhood. There are many other stories that have influenced me, and I'll tell you some of these stories. I went to school, to the only government school in Negele, and while I was in school, I encountered several stories. But one very important story that I always remember is when we went to school. On our way to school, there was a monument, like a grave marker in one corner of the town. And it's a very strange grave marker because it has strange names on the grave markers. As kids, we went and touched this grave marker, and we read what was inscribed on it. And we didn't understand what it was at that time. There was a name written on it, and the name says Gunnar Lundström. Who is Gunnar Lundström? Why is there a grave marker in my village? Gunnar Lundström was a Swedish Red Cross volunteer who came to help Ethiopia during the Italian invasion. And he was killed in my village. My father fought the Italians as a young man. He came all the way from the northern part of Ethiopia, from Tigray. He was wounded in my village. And later on, I could connect the fact that Gunnar Lundström might have treated my father when he was wounded, because my father has told me that he was wounded. This is a powerful story in my life. And then later in school, we had books, textbooks only. We didn't have libraries. We didn't have other kinds of books that we read. But there were books, textbooks. I remember one particular textbook that came from England. It's called The March of Time. The March of Times. And in that textbook, there was this story that has impacted me immensely, and that I have always remembered. It's the story of Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plot. I don't know how many of you know of this story, Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plot, but it's a story of some discontented Catholics in England, in London, who tried to blast the Parliament building to kill the king and the nobles who have been oppressing the Catholics. The king and the nobles were Protestants. What is this story for an Ethiopian kid, a sixth grader, about 12 years old? But this story has stuck in me. Later on, I went to high school in a place called Yirgalem, far away from home. And when I was in high school, I encountered some more stories. This time, our Peace Corps teachers, American Peace Corps teachers, introduced us to literature, American literature. And stories such as Rip Van Winkle and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow were very, very, very exciting for our young minds. Rip Van Winkle slept 20 years, not knowing that there was a revolution in America, and not knowing that there is a new flag, not knowing that there is a new government. When he woke up, his whole world has changed. Stories influence us every day. When I was 19, up to this time, I have never read a book outside of school. When I was 19, a young Ethiopian who had been educated in the US came back with some books. And one particular book attracted my attention because it was a romance book. I was 19 and I was madly in love with a beautiful young Ethiopian at that time. You know, love is another powerful force. Because of that, I read this first book and I was eternally hooked to reading and to books and to the love of literature and to the love of knowledge. Ever since that time, I have read many, many books that have impacted my life. And I have changed my life at the same time. Later on, after high school, I joined the Ethiopian Navy. At that time, you know, we had the seaports, and Eritrea was still part of Ethiopia. And in the Navy, fortunately, there was a library, and there were thousands of books. So I started reading all kinds of books. I graduated from romance to other kinds of fiction, novels, and to other kinds of books. I left the Navy and I got education in pharmacy, and I was working as a pharmacist in Gondar during the Derg times. And you know, those times were very difficult times, and I have to flee from Ethiopia and went to the Sudan. This was in 1980. From the Sudan, I went to the United States and I went to school. And what did I study? Library and Information Science, literature, and then Library and Information Science. In 1991, right after the Derg was overthrown, I was in Addis. I was in Addis in June of 1991. I've already graduated from library school. I was going to start working in a college library in September, but my visit to Ethiopia really changed my life, because when I was here in 1991, I saw thousands and thousands of children on the streets of Addis playing with rug balls and tin cans. Very joyful children, but poor children with tattered clothing, with no shoes, with no other place to go to. There are no parks, there are no playgrounds, there are no places where kids can go in 1991 and even today. So that's when I first thought that I have to do something. All my life I have been a dreamer. I have also been an introvert, a thinker. But I wanted to do something, because the poverty that I saw, especially the children, have touched me so much that I vowed to come back to Ethiopia to bring books, to transform the lives of the children. Because I know from my own personal experience how much transforming stories are, how much transforming books are in general. So I went back to the States and I founded an organization called Ethiopian Books for Children and Educational Foundation. It took me a while. In 1998, the organization was registered in the state of California. In 2002, I came back to Ethiopia for good with 15,000 books shipped in a container. And in 2003, April, the first children's library in Ethiopia, the library that we called Shola Children's Library, was opened. April 5, 2003. Thousands of children started coming. Most of these children go to neighboring schools, but they have never used a library. And some of the kids were saying, "What is a library?" And the first day the library opened, we noticed some of the children were holding books upside down. Well, that did not discourage us, but the kids continued coming, and most of these children became avid readers. Then my idea, my dream, was to really reach out to as many children as possible in Ethiopia. Not only in Addis, but in rural Ethiopia. As I have mentioned earlier, I grew up in the south. I was born in the south. I went to school in Yirgalem, and I knew Awasa from my childhood. So I went to Awasa and established the Awasa Reading Center for Children. And then I thought about how else books can be delivered. Books can be taken to where children are, especially in the outskirts of Awasa and in some village outside of Awasa. There are different methods of delivery of books used in different countries. There are boat libraries, camel libraries, bicycle libraries, portable, handheld box libraries. And one thing that is abundant in Awasa, I noticed, are donkeys. So I said, why don't we use donkeys to deliver books or to take books to children? You know, there's so many donkeys doing all kinds of work in rural communities all over Ethiopia. And we have plenty of donkeys. You know, Ethiopia is the second country with the largest number of donkeys. You might not know which country is the first country in the world that have many donkeys, and I'll just tell you, it's China. So Ethiopia is the second country. So this is a tremendous force. It's a tremendous workforce. So we designed a cart that could be pulled by donkeys. So the first donkey mobile library started operating in the outskirts of Awasa. We have now 7 donkey mobile libraries. So it's not many, it's not much. But what we have noticed in this last 8 years with the donkey mobile libraries and with the Awasa Reading Center and Shola Children's Library in Addis is that children really love reading and that their lives are touched and transformed. Children started getting really their hopes, their inspirations from books, whatever books they read. And they started having purpose in their lives, having direction in their lives. They easily connected with the stories that they read. And the children never stopped coming to these libraries. Because there aren't really any other things that they are distracted with, like in the US, kids are distracted with video games and computers and other things, but kids here in Ethiopia, they don't have anything else. At least the libraries that we established became a heaven for many children. Not only did we provide library reading services, we also provided other services, such as we had the first sanitation program in the world in a library. There were kids who don't have maybe soap or water in their homes. They were not clean, so we started giving them a shower service and soaps, and later on that we extended that into hair cutting and hair braiding for girls. So we became the first library to provide a sanitation program. We also had dance program, theater program, arts and craft program, English teaching program, because most of our books are in English. Probably 99% of the books that we have came from the US. And 99% of the children want to read books in local languages, in Amharic or Oromifa or Tigrinya, but we don't have those books. So our organization also started publishing books. We published 12 books, 12 children's storybooks, colorful books based on Ethiopian culture and history and reality in different languages. We have published books in Amharic and English primarily. We have published books in Sidama, in Oromifa, and in Tigrinya as well. But 12 books is nothing. It's really a drop in the ocean. And then we started also establishing school libraries, because we found out by doing just a little survey in Addis that 99% of the schools, government schools and public schools in Addis, did not have libraries in their schools. And how important it is to have libraries in schools has been found out by research, that schools that have libraries and the children that use their school libraries achieve quite tremendously in their classroom studies, in their classroom work, and in their education. Education without books is like having food without spices. Books are the spices of education. But thousands and probably millions of our children all over Ethiopia are educated without reading any books. They are educated by rote, the teacher writing on the blackboard. So what kind of education is this? It's not really a satisfying education. So we started our first school library in Addis, and now we have established 45 school libraries. It's not much, it's not a lot. We have established school libraries in Oromia region, in southern region, in Addis Ababa, and now in Tigray region we have established 3 school libraries. And our latest addition to our libraries is the library in Mekelle, Children and Youth Library, which has been highly used. We had visits of 1,015 children just this last Saturday. So this work has really been very satisfying and very gratifying for me personally, but it has been also very challenging. It has been challenging because there are so many obstacles. The organization that I founded in 1998 was later on named Ethiopia Reads. And as it was said earlier, I was named one of the 10 CNN heroes in 2008. But unfortunately, right now as I speak in front of you, I'm no longer part of this organization called Ethiopia Reads. I'm out of Ethiopia Reads. And it has saddened me a lot, because it was my dream to establish libraries all over Ethiopia, to bring books and the joy of reading to millions of children in Ethiopia. And that dream has been taken away from me, unfortunately. I'm no longer part of Ethiopia Reads. As I say this, this is really the first time that I'm telling this story. I want to read you a poem by Langston Hughes called A Dream Deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Or does it stink like a rotten meat? Or count crust and sugar over like a syrup, like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? What happens when your dream is deferred? Or worse, what happens when your dream is stolen? And that's my story. Thank you.